The air at Castle Itter does not smell of victory. It smells of wet stone, spent brass, and the pungent, oily stench of a burning Panzerfaust. 5 days have passed since the world learned that Adolf Hitler took his own life in a bunker beneath Berlin. The war is supposed to be over. The Third Reich is a corpse. Yet here, high on a jagged ridge in the Austrian Tyrol, the killing has not stopped. If anything, it has become unreal. May 5th, 1945. Above the village of Itter, a medieval fortress, older than nations, older than ideologies, is under siege. But the lines of battle have collapsed into something that feels like a fever dream. Inside the castle walls, American soldiers from the US 12th Armored Division crouch behind stone battlements, beside men wearing the uniform of the German Wehrmacht. They share ammunition, they shout warnings to each other, they fight shoulder to shoulder against a common enemy, the Waffen-SS. Captain Jack Lee Jr. grips his M1911 pistol, his knuckles white despite the cold. He's a cigar-chomping Californian, square-jawed and blunt. The kind of officer who leads from the front because he wouldn't know how to do it any other way. Beside him stands Major Josef Gangl, a decorated officer of the Wehrmacht. His uniform is dusty, his face drawn tight with exhaustion. He peers through binoculars, adjusting his spectacles with hands that no longer tremble, not from courage but from certainty. Gangl knows something Lee does not yet fully understand. If the SS breach these gates, everyone inside will be executed. Not captured, not interrogated, erased. The first 80mm shell screams through the mountain air. It strikes the upper gatehouse with a deafening roar, showering the courtyard in centuries-old masonry. The blast hits like a physical force, popping ears, rattling teeth, filling mouths with dust and grit. The siege of Castle Itter has begun. To understand how this impossible alliance came to exist, you have to go back 48 hours into the chaos of a collapsing empire. Castle Itter was no ordinary prison. Behind its thick stone walls, the Nazis held some of the most valuable hostages in Europe. Former French Prime Ministers Édouard Daladier and Paul Reynaud, General Maurice Gamelin, and even the famous tennis champion Jean Borotra. They were political currency, insurance policies for a Reich that was running out of time. But when SS guards fled the advancing Allied armies, the prisoners weren't freed. They were abandoned, and abandoned prisoners were liabilities. The surrounding forests were still crawling with SS units. Fanatics who refused to accept defeat, men who believed loyalty demanded one final act of blood. The prisoners knew the truth before anyone told them. The SS would return, and when they did, no one inside Castle Itter would survive. Their only hope came from a man no history book was ever meant to remember, a Yugoslavian cook named Andreas Krobot. Krobot escaped the castle on a bicycle, pedaling through back roads and checkpoints until he reached the town of Würgl. There, he found Major Josef Gangl. Gangl was already living on borrowed time. He commanded a small group of Wehrmacht soldiers who had turned against the SS, choosing conscience over orders. He knew the war was lost. He also knew that refusing the SS now meant death later. Still, when Krobot told him about the prisoners, Gangl didn't hesitate, but he didn't have the men. And he didn't have the firepower. So he did the unthinkable. He drove toward the American lines under a white flag. When Captain Jack Lee first met Gangl, he didn't see an enemy. He saw a man who looked exactly like everyone else he'd seen in Europe by 1945. Exhausted, hollowed out, done. Gangl explained the situation quickly. No speeches, no ideology, just facts. High-value prisoners, SS approaching, certain execution. Lee listened. Then he nodded. He volunteered immediately. Lee took one Sherman tank, nicknamed Besotten Jenny, and a handful of American soldiers. As they rolled through the Austrian countryside, villagers watched in stunned silence. An American tank leading a column of German Wehrmacht trucks. History was folding in on itself. Back at Castle Itter, Besotten Jenny now blocks the main gate, her 75mm gun firing into the tree line. The SS move through the foliage like ghosts, their camouflage blending into the spring green. These aren't retreating conscripts. They are the 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division, veterans, fanatics, men with nothing left to lose. "Incoming!" Lee shouts. Another shell slams into the Sherman. This one hits true. Besotten Jenny erupts in fire and smoke as internal ammunition begins to cook off, tracers spiraling into the sky like lethal fireworks. The crew barely escapes. The defenders' only heavy weapon is gone. Inside the castle, the French prisoners understand what that means. Paul Reynaud refuses to hide. He picks up a submachine gun, his hands shaking, not from fear but from disbelief. This is not the war he thought he would fight. General Gamelin moves along the wall, directing fire with calm authority. Politics have burned away. Only survival remains. MG-42s open up from the hills, the infamous Hitler's buzzsaw. The sound rips through the air like canvas tearing, bullets chewing into stone that has stood since the Middle Ages. Gangl watches the SS positions carefully. He knows their tactics, he knows their hatred, and he knows something else. They recognize him. To the SS, Joseph Gangl is not just a defector. He is a traitor. He lowers his binoculars and turns toward Reynaud, about to shout a warning. He sees the glint first, a sniper's scope hidden in the tree line. Gangl understands instantly. The shot isn't meant for the Frenchman. It's meant for him. He moves anyway. He shoves Reynaud back behind a stone pillar just as the rifle cracks. Gangl falls without a sound. Captain Lee reaches him first, dragging him behind cover. But the wound is fatal. A single bullet, perfectly placed. A German major, killed by German hands, while saving a French prime minister under American command. The war's final irony is written in his blood on the castle stones. Gangl is the only defender who will die that day. By midday, the situation is desperate. Ammunition is running low. The SS are probing the walls. Scaling ladders appear at the base of the fortress. Captain Lee looks at his men, soot-covered, bleeding, exhausted. He knows they cannot hold much longer. That's when Jean Borotra steps forward. The tennis star knows the terrain. He knows the woods. He offers to do the impossible, vault the wall, slip through the SS lines, and guide the American relief force rumored to be nearby. Lee hesitates only a moment. Borotra disappears into the trees under fire, moving with the speed and grace that once made him a champion. Inside the castle, time stretches. Every sound feels amplified. Every footstep echoes like a countdown. The SS begin their final push. Boots scrape stone. Shouts rise from below. Grenades arc into the courtyard. Lee orders bayonets fixed. They prepare to die in a castle that was never theirs, for people they met only hours ago. Then, a new sound. Not the MG-42, not artillery. Heavy engines, American engines. The 142nd Infantry Regiment breaks through the trees, guns blazing. The SS, suddenly trapped between the castle and fresh American forces, scatter into the mountains. Just like that, it's over. As evening falls over the Tyrol, silence settles over Castle Itter. Captain Lee sits on a stone step, hands shaking as adrenaline drains away. Around him, American soldiers and German defectors sit side by side, too exhausted to speak. No salutes are exchanged. No speeches are made, only understanding. The Battle of Castle Itter remains the only time in World War II when American and German soldiers fought as allies. Not for flags, not for ideology, but for people. The war in Europe would officially end 2 days later, but for the men at Castle Itter, it ended when they realized something simpler, something older than nations, that the man fighting beside you is not your enemy. At Castle Itter, the war didn't end with surrender papers. It ended with 2 uniforms sharing the same wall, looking out at a world that would never be the same again.